What's going on, my people? Back for the second day recap of my World Open experience. Man, was today a tiring day. Got two pretty interesting games to show you. Don't want to make this video too long, so I will more or less breeze through some of parts of them, especially the first game. But yeah, let's get into it. So for round two, which was the first round earlier this morning, I played against a kid about 14 years old in 2100 USCF, and I had the white pieces. We have e4, e5, and now not the Italian, not the Roy Lopez, not the Petrov, none of that. I play the move d4, the center game. Takes, queen takes. Pretty rare way to play with white. Objectively, not the best, but I have been experimenting with it a bit lately, and it's good to take someone out of their comfort zone. You know, I knew he probably has great preparation against the Italian or whatnot, but how is he going to do against this? Obviously, he plays knight c6, attacking the queen. I drop back to e3, and here there's a bunch of different setups black can go for. He set up with g6. I said, okay, knight c3, bishop g7, and just pretty normal development, although my queen is a little bit awkwardly placed on e3. He played d6, I played bishop d2. And here he played a6. This is the first moment that I had to really think, because he's clearly preparing b5. And I wasn't really keen on playing a4 because I saw that he can go knight b4, attacking this pawn, threatening a fork. I don't really want a long castle if I already committed this pawn forward. And if I slide back, maybe he goes here. And if I take him, he goes boom, and it's a fork. So it's very kind of annoying. I decided not to play a4. I played a3. He still played b5. But now I put my bishop back on a2 after some maneuvering. And he decided just to castle. We both castled. He played bishop g4. And here, slowly, I started to kind of build my advantage. I didn't get much of an edge out of the opening. But here, I found a nice maneuver, dropping the knight back, hitting his knight with my bishop, and now bishop c3. You know, the whole time his bishop was very annoying, kind of eyeing the whole board down from g7, so I thought, why not trade it off? And he played queen d7 here. Maybe I already should have just taken the bishop, but I decided just to improve my pieces, played rook d1. He decided to trade. He played knight e5. I didn't take. I just played queen g3, and he came in with his queen, and here I came up with an interesting maneuver. Instead of just putting my knight on d4, to attack the queen looks tempting, but I saw that he drops back and he attacks the pawn. So instead I played knight f4 and now knight d5. And when he took, I took back with bishop, and I'm kind of skewering his queen and rook. He basically has to block with the pawn. He didn't take. That was a mistake on my part. He blocked with the pawn. I went back, and even though it's I went to d5 and came back, now his d6 pawn is a big weakness, as is kind of his c6 pawn. You know, the downside of him having pushed the b pawn earlier is now he's left with these kind of split pawns, whereas my pawns are all pretty intact. And here he played queen e7. And so by this point I knew I have a pretty good position. I have the two bishops. I have him under some pressure. Obviously he has a bunch of weaknesses, but I wasn't really sure how to go forward. I ended up playing f4 after I spent a lot of time. We both spent quite a bit of time in this game. This is move 23 now, and I probably had less than 15, maybe even 10 minutes left by this point. Played f4, and he played knight d7. And what I was planning on doing is trading the bishops here, which I did, and then playing the move queen d3, so that I hit his d6 pawn, and he can't exactly defend it. But I realized when I got here, he can play knight f6. And if I take on d6, he takes on e4. And I'm not really winning a pawn. Now, granted, my position here is still pretty good. Maybe I can just play rook e1 or something. You know, he still has two very weak pawns. I still have the bishop. But I kind of I don't know, I didn't think I was getting enough here. So I thought, why not just try to build the tension? And instead I played the move queen c3 check. I found this to be better because I'm actually hitting him with a fork. And if he were to play queen f6, he actually walks into a pin I was going to take, because he can't take my rook. He has to take the queen. And even though I have doubled pawns here, I'm hitting the knight, I'm hitting the pawn. His position is very shaky. but he blocked with the knight. And now I was like, wait a minute, if I take this pawn, he can either take or first go even check. And I can't block the check on the long diagonal, and then he goes knight g4, and he's threatening like a smothered mate combo. Like if I'm not careful, if I just recklessly take this pawn, we would have check, check, check on g1, and checkmate. Something always to look out for. You got to know your smothered mate pattern. So I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to allow any checks on that diagonal, so I can't take the pawn yet. I just played rook a4, defending my e4 pawn, and just kind of like trying to keep the tension. He played king g8, getting out of the pin. And again, I like wasn't sure what to do. I had less than 10 minutes at this point. I played queen d4, kind of an awkward move, like I was trying to block the check from the diagonal and attack the d6 pawn. He just defended. And now I got really low on time. I got down to a few minutes, and things really started to go downhill here. Like at this point, I'm probably still a bit better, and I'm not sure what I should have played, but I played the move rook e1 because I was thinking, you know, I kind of saw that he was going to play d5. I was thinking, oh, he can't take now because, or he can't play d5 because I take with a discovered attack. But wait a minute, my rook isn't defended, and he plays d5 anyway. And I'm like, oh. Now I have to play e5. And now he plays c5. I have to go back again. And now he plays knight d7. He didn't want to play knight d4 because then I could probably get away with taking this pawn. So he drops back. And it looks at first like I can take here. But then he would go knight b6 and hit me with this fork. So I can't do that. And again, I got super low on time, played a horrendous move. Queen f3, a move that does literally nothing. Like, I don't know what I was thinking here. I just completely tweaked on this one. Like, I should have at least played c3 here, so that when he plays c4, I can drop the bishop back, and things aren't looking too great for me. But at least like I'm sort of holding together. Instead, I played queen f3. Terrible move. He played c4, and then he played knight c5, and like he was just banging these moves out at this point. Like the momentum completely shifted from me putting pressure on him to him now putting pressure on me, and I'm making every move on the increment, basically. Like I had no time. I played rook a3, he plays knight e4, and now he's threatening queen c5. And I should have played the move queen e3 here, probably, and I'm still like okay-ish, although definitely struggling. Instead, I played king h1, anticipating the check, but missing queen b4. Devastating move. Hits my rook and threatens to take this pawn. And I can't defend both because then he goes knight b2, and he has a fork. Knight and queen, or rook and queen with a knight. So in this position, I played queen e3. He took my pawn. And here I was trying to decide between rook a4 and rook a5, which both looked terrible. And I actually was not even able to decide in time because short of me making a move, I actually just flagged. Like my time ran out before I could even get my move off. I was probably just going to end up playing rook a4. But in this position, I'm pretty much just lost. Like everything fell apart for me. I checked the engine briefly after the game, and it said that the peak of my position somewhere around here. Yeah, somewhere around here. It was like plus 2.5. Yeah, maybe a few moves before. It was plus 2.5, and by the end of the game, it was minus 3.5. Just to let you know how quickly everything fell apart for me. Yeah, that was very very unfortunate, very unhappy with myself I was to lose on time before even making the time control, where I would have gotten extra 30 minutes. But yeah, I mean, I was just trying to look for the best way to kind of go into a favorable endgame, and I just wasn't able to find it, and lost the game. Now, my round 3 game was quite the roller coaster. So going into this game, unlike my first two, I had absolutely zero preparation for this opponent. Like, I could not find anything about him. Couldn't find any of his online sites or accounts. Couldn't find his like chess-based profile. Knew nothing about what he plays, so I just kind of said, okay, whatever. We're just going to go in and try to play my stuff. He played d4. I played d6. He played knight f3, knight f6, and then he played bishop f4. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, cool. He's going to play a London system. You know, I'm pretty comfortable playing against the London. I have my own sort of system against it. But then he played knight c3, which kind of like I don't know if this was intentional on his part or not, but he found like a loophole literally in my repertoire. Like knight c3, I was really not sure what to play here. This is one kind of like move order which I was not sure how to tackle because he's like flipping the cards on me and first trying to go from a London into more of like a Perk or a Jabava London setup. And so I wasn't sure, like, do I just play bishop g7? Do I play some kind of a6, b5 stuff like in the modern, which maybe I should have tried? Instead, I just played knight d7 and then bishop g7. But he played queen d2 and bishop h6. And he's just very annoyingly tried to trade off my my bishop. And so I said, okay, I need to break quickly in the center with e5 while he still hasn't castled. But he traded, and then he long castles. And here he has a pretty good position because my development is a little bit lacking. I played rook e8, and he plays h4. And I'm thinking, okay, I kind of anticipated this. I'm like, okay, he's going to try to do some stuff over there, but he's not really well set up for it, so whatever. c6. And he went ahead and played h5. I was like, all right, this guy's got some balls, but so do I. Knight takes. What are you going to do? Sack the rook for the knight? I doubt it. He played g4. And maybe he was anticipating that I go back, in which case he comes in with the queen with a check, and then he can play knight g5 or bishop c4, and I'm under some heat. But I played knight f4. I found a little square to block his queen, and it's not so easy for him to break through now. Now, he could have actually done this, takes, and then sack the knight back for a pawn. But then at the end of the line, I saw that I would have queen g5, trading off the queens. And I was pretty comfortable with going into this endgame. So he decided to play bishop c4, and I played queen e7. And this is like an early critical stage of the game, because we got to this point. He already had used more than half of his time out of his starting 80 minutes on the first 14 moves. And at this point, he went into a deep, or not deep, just a long think. And he was like, not sure what to do. He had a bunch of clearly like sharp ideas on his mind, one of which being, and I really thought he was going to go for this. The more he thought, I thought he was going to sack here. Because if I take with the king, he hits me here and he skewers my queen. But if my queen takes, he can still do this and then fork me. And at the end of the line, it's he's giving up a bishop, a rook, and a knight for a queen and 2 pawns, which I felt like I would be fine here, although practically it would not be easy to defend. But he thought and thought and thought, and eventually just kind of like cowered out and played rook h2. And so I was like, wow, okay, knight f8. Now I have everything covered. I have the h7 pawn defended. And here he started just to like, he was panicking a little bit. He started to like mutter stuff under his breath. He was like cursing himself. Like he played rook g1, and I'm like, okay, I can seal things up and play g5. Only as soon as I played that, I was like, wait a minute. I kind of made a big weakness now. He played knight d1, and now his plan is clear. He's going to bring his knight to e3 and then try to put out an f5. And I definitely should not have allowed that. But I'm like, okay, I'm still better. b5. And then I played f6 just to shore up my pawns so that he wouldn't have any like sacrifices or anything. He plays knight e3. And at this point, let's see, he had on his clock less than 3 minutes. I still had 40. So I really should have like taken my time here and found like a precise way to continue. And I thought I had. I played c5, trying to like close his bishop. I thought that he would play c3 or c4, and then I could just close his bishop this way. But he played bishop d5, a move I was not anticipating. And it turns out that, I mean, I don't really want to take because I'm giving up my strong knight. He'll just take back, and he's got a pretty good outpost for his. And I can't block like this, which was something I thought I had because he has knight f5 and he wins my queen. So I can't do that. So I played rook b8, and even though he had like no time, he was just sort of building the tension, like, doing the only thing he could do. Played knight g1 here, brought his knight over this way, and now I took But when he took back, I realized that I'm letting his knight into e4. That's not good. But anyway, I took. He went check. And I have everything covered here. Like, I'm doing fine. You know, my knight, very importantly, defends the h7 pawn. And, like, maybe there was something here he should have done to, like, try to build the pressure. I don't know, play, like, knight h6 or rook h6. But he had 1 minute on the clock, and he lashed out. Knight takes g5, which I knew does not work. Because I take, and yeah, he's threatening checkmate. But I have it covered. Only I need to be slightly careful. Which square do I defend the checkmate from? Queen to g6 or queen to f6? Well, if you said queen g6, you just blundered. Rook takes. Knight takes. You drop the queen. Oh, you want to take by queen? You just blundered knight. Knight takes. And queen g7. So that was one trap I had to avoid. I played queen f6. And he was like cursing under his breath again. He's like, man, this guy's good. Like, throughout the game, literally, he was repeating this. He was like in his own head because he clearly underestimated me a bit. You know, he saw my ratings like 1980. His is 2100, about 2040 FIDE. And so he was like panicking. He's like, I can't break this guy. Like, and he went back. And so I'm like, okay, I can block his queen. Played rook h6. I just go back. He plays queen e1. He's just like fishing for stuff. You know, he's trying to put me under some pressure. Like, I mean, he's down a piece. There's not much he can do. And I knew, like, my position here is borderline winning. I'm up a piece. Yeah, my king is not the safest, but I just have to, you know, make sure I keep everything solid and find some way to, like, either trade down or just checkmate him. But that's easier said than done. And in this position, I played the move rook d5 just to protect the pawn. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to double my rooks now and try to hit him on the back rank. But he played knight e3. And I realized that if I just drop back, like I thought, I'll just go to d7 and then play rook d8. He has this tricky move, knight takes c4. And after pawn takes, he takes here, and it's a fork, queen and rook. I'm losing a piece. So I can't fall for that. What do? I played rook d4. But now he went here, and I thought, okay, I'll just play knight d5. I'm going to trade the knights off. If he takes, well, that's just fantastic for me. I take back. I traded off one of his pieces. If he plays queen d6, it looks like he's going to take here, but I have check, and I win the queen. But he played queen c5. And again, I'm in a little bit of a weird situation. I mean, I can't take this right away because he takes, and again, he has a fork. So, you know, maybe at some point in all of this, I kind of regretted this later, I should have given up a rook just for his knight. Like, just gone into a situation where I have 2 knights and a rook versus his 2 rooks, and I still would have been winning. Because with just this one knight, he managed to be very tricky. Played knight f5, and suddenly he's hitting my rook, and he's threatening to come to d6 with a fork. And so I thought, I have it covered. And I took on g4. But I also was very low on time at this point. I had, at this point, 10 minutes or so. Yeah, I dropped under 10 minutes. Like, I had 40 at some point, and slowly, every move, I was losing 2-3 minutes trying to find, you know, the accurate way to defend. And now, I thought that, okay, he plays knight d6, and I play queen g7, and he can't take my rook because I have back rank mate. Takes, and mate. But he played a move that I missed, f3, with his queen covering g1. And now I'm in trouble. I played rook d4 to block the queen, which was probably a mistake. Not really sure what I should have done instead. And the reason it was a mistake is because I had actually miscalculated. What I saw was that if he takes my rook, I can take on h6. Because again, if he takes my queen, I have back rank checkmate. And what I thought is that he can play c3 to give him his king some space, but I thought I can still do this. Because I go check, and checkmate, right? Isn't that mate? No. It turns out it's not mate because he can take with his queen. Something I did not see in my calculation. I forgot that when I moved the rook, the e3 square is now covered by his queen, and it's not mate. And I don't have this back rank trick anymore. And after c3, which he eventually played, I'm in huge trouble. Like, literally all my pieces are hanging. How on earth did this happen? My rook's under attack, my other rook's under attack, and after this rook moves, my knight's gonna hang. Unbelievable. How did I manage to get myself into this mess? Like, I was so demoralized by this point. I was like, I had a completely winning position, and I'm gonna blow it again. And so I thought, what can I do? Like, he thought for a long time on c3 for some reason, but eventually he played it, and I just said, okay, I have to give back material to get myself out of this mess. So I sacked, and sacked again, and we get to a position where I have rook and knight versus two rooks, and I'm obviously on the defensive. Only thing I have going for me is that his king is also pretty open, and I'm up a few pawns, and I played e4. Like at this point, I didn't even have the energy left or the motivation to like really think. So I was like, I'm just gonna play e4 and try to complicate things, and it kind of worked because at this point, like even though we had the 30-minute bonus time, he thought for like 15 minutes on his last move, and then another like 10 minutes here, and eventually he took, and then he's like, okay, I don't want to like try to risk anything. I'm gonna trade the queens off. And so, okay, I said, okay, let's trade. I play king g7. I defend my pawn. And at this point, I'm just hoping I can hold this endgame. I got a knight and two pawns for a rook, which is like technically enough. But at the same time, I mean, two rooks are very strong. And if he can get a passed pawn on the queen side, I'm going to be in trouble. And so he started like checking me, started to put me under some pressure. And now I went for an interesting maneuver. I played check and rook here, sort of tying him down to this pawn. Like, if he plays king b4, I just take. And that should be enough for me to hold. But if he doesn't play king b4, well, how is he going to defend the pawn? He played rook back, and I played a5, which in hindsight was a mistake, but I just wanted to like stop his king from moving. But I missed this next move, which is rook b1. And now again, I was like, okay, I'm lost here, because I'm about to lose all my pawns on the queen side. And so I went for one last knight maneuver, which I was just hoping would somehow catch him off guard. And it actually did. Knight f4, he took the pawn, and I played knight d3. And here he again started to panic. He was like, oh my god, this guy, he's good. How did I miss this? Like, he was just muttering under his breath. To be honest, he's perfectly fine here. He just needed to play king a4, and even if I take this pawn, like, he still has two rooks and a pass pawn. Like, he probably has enough to win here. But he was just like so probably just tired himself and so like, I don't know, panicking. He took the knight after giving a couple checks. He just took the knight because I guess he thought his king was getting mated if he didn't sack. And so we somehow get to this end game where it's rook and 2 versus rook and 2. And I found this little maneuver to get my pawn to d2, and we both just started pushing. And honestly, I don't know, maybe there was some way I could have tried to win this because my pawn is farther advanced, but I didn't have the energy to do it even if I had the ability. Like, maybe if I was fresh, I would have found some way, but I just pushed my pawn, pushed my king, and he ended up sacking the rook for my pawn. I sacked the rook for his pawn, and that's game over, and then it ended a draw. Absolutely insane game. I mean, we were both completely winning at some point, but yeah, it just petered out to draw. That's just how it goes. I was so exhausted. I don't know how long this game went. I think like probably 5 hours or so. Yeah, very long game. So yeah, I finished day 2, round 3 with 1.5 out of 3. Gonna be looking to bounce back and get back to winning ways tomorrow. Stay tuned.